அனைவருக்கும் மாலை வணக்கம். திரு ஆ.இர வெங்கடாச்சலபதி அவர்களின் ஆராய்ச்சிகள், குறிப்பாக அவருடைய தமிழ் நூலின் வரலாற்று ஆய்வுகள் நமக்கு ஒரு முக்கியமான பாதை கொடுத்துள்ளது. நான் கடந்த 18 ஆண்டுகளாக அந்த பாதையில் தொடர்ந்து நடந்து கொண்டு வந்திருக்கிறேன். 2000 நான் மிச்சிகன் பல்கலைக்கழகத்தில் PhD மாணவராய் இருக்கும்போது அவர் எழுதிய கட்டுரையான Reading Practices and Modes of Reading in Colonial Tamil Nadu என்பதை படித்த பின்னால் அவரை சந்திக்க வேண்டும் என்று தோன்றியது. புதுக்கோட்டையில் நடந்த அறிவொளியக்கம் பற்றி ஒரு ஆராய்ச்சி செய்ய வேண்டும் என்று முடிவு செய்தேன். இந்த ஆராய்ச்சி வெற்றிகரமாக முடிந்தால் இந்த கட்டுரை ஒரு முக்கியமான வழிகாட்டியாக இருக்கும் என்று புரிந்து கொண்டேன். நம் நண்பர் பாணி பேட் ஏற்கனவே திரு வெங்கடாச்சலபதி அவர்கள் பற்றி என்னிடம் நிறைய சொன்னார். ஆனால் அவரை சந்திக்க பயந்தேன். நான் தமிழ் மொழியை கற்றுக்கொள்ள அப்பொழுதுதான் ஆரம்பித்திருந்தேன். நான் கொஞ்சம் தான் அறிந்திருந்த காரணத்தால் ஒரு சிறந்த அறிஞரிடம் எப்படி பேச முடியும் என்று கவலைப்பட்டேன். நாம் மேலும் சில ஆழமான விஷயங்களை வாசித்து அறிந்து கொள்ளும் வரை காத்திருந்தேன். ஆனால் அவரை சந்திக்கும் போது 2002 மிகவும் கனிவும் எளிமையும் நிறைந்தவராக இருந்தார். நீங்கள் திருநெல்வேலியில் தமிழ் ஜகனை போய் சந்திக்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொன்னார். அவர் அறிவொளி இயக்கத்தில் ஒரு முக்கியமான ஆள். இருங்க, இதை படிங்க என்று நாவலும் வாசிப்பும் என்று அவர் எழுதிய நூலை எனக்கு கொடுத்தார். எங்கள் அடுத்த சந்திப்பில் இதுவும் படிக்கலாம் என்று முச்சந்தி இலக்கியம் என்ற புத்தகத்தை கொடுத்தார். மிக கஷ்டப்பட்டு அந்த 2 நூலையும் படித்த பின்பு நான் வெங்கடாச்சலபதி அவர்களின் ஆராய்ச்சியின் முழு அர்த்தத்தையும் புரிந்து கொண்டேன். மௌனமாக படிக்கிறது ஒரு நடுத்தர மற்றும் உயர் வர்க்கத்தினரின் பழக்கம். வரலாற்றில் மேற்கொள்ளப்பட்ட புதிய ஒரு பழக்கம் ஆகும். ஆனால் சத்தமாக வாசிக்கிறது பொதுமக்களின் பழக்கம் என்பதை அவருடைய ஆராய்ச்சியிலிருந்து பெறுகிறோம். என் ஆராய்ச்சி தொடர்வதற்கு முன் இதை வாசிக்கும் அதிர்ஷ்டம் எனக்கு கிடைத்தது. If I was to understand and research subaltern reading practices, it was important to know the difference between these approaches to reading or reciting. அதாவது படிக்கிறது வேறு, வாசிக்கிறது வேறு. Much of the அறிவொளியக்கம்'s efforts went into teaching people the basic script. எழுத்துக்கள், அப்புறம் கையெழுத்து. Already at the beginning level, teachers in the movement became aware of a very different approach to language among villagers they sought to enlighten through literacy. The first words they were taught to read in the அறிவொளியக்கம் were patta and padi. Because these letters were very easy to use and because அந்த வார்த்தையில் ஒரு அரசியல் இருக்கு. ஆனால் ஆரம்பத்தில் நிறைய பேர் கேட்டாங்க, ஏன் பட்டா படி கற்றுக்கணும்? நீங்கள் ஆனா ஆவணா சொல்லிக் கொடுக்க மாட்டீங்களா? Knowing that the அடிச்சுவடு, how it sounds, even without knowing how to read and write. I think this is a lesson in the primacy of sound in learning reading and language more generally, and it's not limited to Tamil, but it's certainly recognized and theorized in the Tamil grammatical tradition, perhaps more than elsewhere. But the difference between modes of reading became especially important as I began to study the efforts of the அறிவொளியக்கம் volunteers and intellectuals to devise a literature for neo-literates, that is to say, people who did not know how to read and write, or were just learning. As part of my dissertation research that also went into writing my first book, The Light of Knowledge, I undertook a study of what was called the Makkal Vasipu Iyakkam. As Professor Venkatachalapathy notes of the chapbook culture of the 1920s and 30s, I'll quote from his essay, The popular mode of consuming literature, reading aloud, usually in groups, unfettered by lack of literacy, is in marked contrast to the mode of reading adopted by the middle class. He was documenting the beginning of a whole split in modes of reading and reading practices. As I studied further, I realized that some same things could be said about rural Tamil Nadu in the 1990s and even into the 2000s. That is to say, there's a public familiarity with reading aloud. சத்தமா வாசிக்கிறது ஒரு புது பழக்கம், one that had to be used by the literacy movement. In researching how the Adivaliakam literacy movement was developing a new literature that was meant to be read aloud in groups, I was in fact retracing the steps of authors and activists from the Tamil Nadu Murupokka Eluthalu Sangam, or TAMUSA. Authors like Sa Tamilchelvan, Melanmai Punnasamy, the education expert Dr. Sa Marasamy, and also authors like K. Rajanarayanan, who is also mentioned in Professor Venkatajapathi's essays on reading practices, which I had read some years before. These authors were in search of a method that would allow them to write an innovative new modern of literature, and more precisely, to develop what the literary critic and philosopher Walter Benjamin would call a new function within the literary relations of production. That is to say, activating readers as reciters, which is already a different role, and perhaps inviting them to become authors. Drawing on classics of world literature from Ibsen's A Doll's House, Bommai Veedu, O. Henry's One Leaf Left, Kadaisiyale, these authors were equally invested in Tamil folklore as a source of this new variety of literature. Sometimes the two were fused, as in Kachamaram, which was an adaptation of Shakespeare's King Lear that Kira wrote for the movement. Modern Tamil literature was also a major source, such as Pudumai Pittan's Sangadevanan Dharmam, which had been renamed as Muttachi. After many workshops, people realized that it was not just Pecha Tamil that they had to use. I remember interviewing Sa Tamilchelvan and him telling me that Pecha Tamilukku Surya Maryadai Venum, oru Suya Maryadai Iyakam Venum, Pecha Tamilukku. And that had been a long dream of modern literature. But after participating as authors and activists in the Makkalvasipu Iyakam, they realized they had to develop a new language that was to be read aloud, that was different from Pecha Tamil, as well as from existing varieties. Pecha Nadaivera, Yelutha Nadaivera, Vasipu Nadaivera. This is one of the great discoveries of the literacy movement, I think, that had in fact become a literary movement, even if we're unlikely to read about it in our textbooks, with echoes from important revolutionary movements elsewhere. It was when I began to study the history and contemporary sociology of Tamil language newspapers that I understood that this problem had already found a solution of sorts in a very different variety of literature. As Chalapati notes at the end of his essay on reading practices, the subaltern mode of Vasipu has continued into the post-colonial era. I'll quote from his text. The popular mode of reading was far from being displaced by the new phenomenon of silent reading. If anything, it was spreading even further in domains over which the middle class had little, if any, influence with the growth of the daily press. Sipa Aditan, the shrewd entrepreneur and founder of Dinatandi, the largest selling Tamil daily, observed in his inaugural day in 1942, the newspaper would replace the Mahabharatam and the Ramayanam as that which children would read aloud to their illiterate parents in the evenings. I was later to find this quote from the speech in the Dinatandi Punvila special booklet. Professor Venkatajapati then goes on to quote from Kira's descriptions of reading the newspaper aloud on the Tinai in his classic Gopalapurutha Makkal. Now, what Professor Chalapati had noted as what he called an interesting footnote of sorts to his popular study, I saw as a sociological research question, opening a new path to rethinking how we might understand the role of newspapers in the formation of the public sphere, to think more critically about what we mean about circulations. Thinkers such as Jürgen Habermas and Benedict Anderson had both placed the newspaper reading at the center of their theories of political modernity, as Professor Srinath Raghavan noted yesterday, influencing generations of scholarship on the formation of national imaginaries and democratic politics. But both thinkers and their followers were thinking of a mode of reading that was much closer to what Professor Chalapati has identified as a bourgeois habitus, or uyar vardinarin palakam, that has not achieved complete hegemony in Tamil Nadu, where public reading aloud had long stood as the norm. I did some research on public aloud reading in the tikares of Pudukkottai and found that it was actually still the case in the early 2000s. Dinatandi still continued to act as an oral mode of communication. Now, when I went to the Dinatandi archive in the Chennai office in Punnamari High Road, more recently, going through their collection and interviewing old-timers, I learned that their original attraction was not necessarily the local news it is now known for. Especially in the 40s and 50s, Tandi was able to outmaneuver the competition because of two other distinct advantages it had when it was launched. Because of Sipa Aditan's history as an advocate and Hindu reporter in Singapore prior to his return to Madurai to start the paper in 1942, Dinatandi had a wide network of reporters based in Southeast Asia that could deliver news about the Second World War much faster than any other paper could. It was based in Madurai, then opening in Trichy and Madras, and was able to use local transportation systems, buses, other modes, the mail system, more effectively to get news around Madras state than other papers. Items that were published in this newspaper, but not available in other papers until much later, were published with a special star next to them in the early years, so you would know that this was an exclusive in the Dinatandi. Dinatandi thus revolutionized reading, the circulation of text, and by extension the Tamil public sphere in multiple ways. By expanding news gathering with a wide network, lessening the time it took for the paper to reach readers, and deepening the reach into the interior, and by expanding who counts as a reader of the news massively by developing this style that was to be designed to be read aloud in groups as a mode of transmission. Of course, not everyone thought this was a great thing, and people sometimes used derisive terms to refer to the paper. In fact, Aditan responded to criticisms with his Patrika Reconsidering, explaining his use of spoken Tamil. And he tells you what a headline should be, what you would tell a person about the story that they're about to read. That's why you have the long headlines in Dinatandi. While other papers have gone for one-word headlines, Tandi has retained its style to this day, even if it is probably increasingly rare to find the kinds of vasipu that I observed 15 years ago in rural Pudukkottai. Of course, much has changed in recent years. 21st century Tamil Nadu will be defined by subaltern modes of reading, more closely intertwined with handheld digital screens than with ink on paper. And this requires further research. But it is a research that, if it is to be successful, will have to take into account the deeper histories of reading and textual practice that Professor Venkatachapati has unearthed and shared with us all. And I just want to end with another more sort of personal note, that when the province of the book was finally in preparation for publishing in only 2012, so fairly recently, the dissertation was already legendary among graduate students and professors. Everyone was interested in what it would look like as a book. Chalapati showed me when I was visiting him once in his office that he had cited an earlier piece I had wrote about Dinatandi's modes of circulation. And that recognition for me was more important than any other form of recognition or any citation, and remains a touchstone in my writing and my career. To be recognized by this guru, who I can now also count as among my close friends.